At the end of 1943, the situation of the German armed forces on the fronts of the Second World War had significantly deteriorated, as indicated in the Oberkommando reports, where armored losses on the Eastern Front exceeded 2,000 vehicles during the period from July to November of that year as a result of the Red Army's operation at Kursk and the subsequent offensives. On the Western Front, the landing of Allied troops was expected, requiring reinforcement of anti-tank defenses. Allied air bombing led to the destruction of key production facilities, including the Alkit plant in Berlin, where Stu-G assault guns were produced. And in the report of November 20, 1943, it was noted that production of these guns had decreased by 60% due to equipment damage. In this regard, Adolf Hitler, in Directive No. 51 of November 3, 1943, demanded accelerated development and production of light, inexpensive tank destroyers to compensate for losses. This task was assigned to the Bomish-Marish Maskinen fabric plant in Prague, in occupied Czechoslovakia, where production of the Panzer 38T chassis was already underway. The development goals included creating a vehicle weighing no more than 13 tons with sloped armor for improved protection, a speed of up to 42 km per hour, and the capability of mounting a 75 mm anti-tank gun. The Panzer 38T chassis, previously used for light tanks, was chosen due to its established production and availability of components, which allowed reduction in the time needed to launch mass production. And the vehicle was to be suitable for defensive operations with an emphasis on ambush tactics, according to the Armaments Conference Protocol of December 1, 1943, development was proceeding at an accelerated pace, and on December 9 of that year the project received approval, after which BMM engineers began adapting the Panzer 38T chassis, whose initial weight was 9.85 tons, but with the addition of the fighting compartment and armor was expected to increase to 15. On December 15, 1943, preliminary drawings were presented, in which installation of the Star recoilless gun was considered, but it was rejected in favor of the standard Pak 39L/48 due to ammunition availability and proven design. And on January 8, 1944, the final drawings were completed. To reduce the silhouette, the gun was mounted in a fixed casemate shifted 290 mm to the right for weight balance. And the crew consisted of 4 men, the driver, the gunner, the loader, and the commander. On January 24, 1944, a full-scale wooden mock-up was ready. And the inspection revealed deficiencies in ergonomics, because the cramped fighting compartment required lengthening the casemate by 200 mm. And in February 1944, prototype tests confirmed problems with visibility and evacuation, where the gun's traverse angle was 11 degrees to the left and 5 degrees to the right. The influence of external projects was reflected in the inspection group report of February 1944, where the design was partially borrowed from the Romanian tank destroyer Mersal M04. This machine weighed 6.7 tons, had sloped armor of 30 to 40 mm and a 75 mm gun. At the same time, German engineers noted the advantage of a low profile and sloped armor for improving ricochet protection. The official designation of the vehicle was Leichter Panzerjäger 38 or Jagdpanzer 38, and the nickname meaning instigator originally belonged to the E-10 project. But due to an error in BMM documentation it was applied to this model. And in the memorandum of the Inspector General of Armored Troops Heinz Guderian from April 1944 it was stated that frontline troops independently assigned this name to the vehicle, reflecting its tactical use in ambushes. And the designation took root in unofficial documents and post-war literature. Technical characteristics. according to the technical passport of the model approved in March 1944, included dimensions with a hull length of 4.87 m and 6.38 m with the gun, a width of 2.63 m, a height of 2.17 m, and a ground clearance of 0.40 m. The empty weight of the vehicle was 14.5 tons, and the combat weight was 15.75 tons with ammunition and fuel. The armor of homogeneous steel consisted of a casemate front of 60 mm at a 60 degrees angle, giving an equivalent vertical protection of about 120 mm, side armor of 20 mm at 40 degree, rear armor of 20 mm at 35 degree, roof of 8 mm, and floor of 8 to 10 mm. Armament included the main 75 mm Pak 39L/48 gun with a barrel length of 3,600 mm and an armor-piercing shell muzzle velocity of 792 meters per second, with an ammunition load of 41 rounds, of which 20 were armor-piercing, 18 high-explosive fragmentation, and 3 shape charge. And a secondary 7.92 mm MG 34 or MG 42 machine gun on the roof with remote control and an ammunition load of 600 rounds in 50-round magazines requiring manual reloading. The disadvantages noted in test reports included the cramped 2.5 cubic meters fighting compartment leading to rapid crew fatigue, limited visibility with a 90 degrees field for the commander through the periscope, the engine's tendency to overheat during prolonged operation, uneven suspension where due to the gun being offset to the right side, loaded 15% more, and problems with starting in cold weather, where the electric starter was unreliable, requiring manual cranking or oil preheating. Production, according to reports from 1944 and 1945, began in April 1944 in Prague with the first batch of 10 vehicles for testing, and in May-June 1944 reached 150 units per month. The ODA factory was connected in June, adding 50 units monthly. From July to December 1944, the average rate was 200 to 250 vehicles per month, despite bombings. And in the report of August 15, 1944, it was indicated that losses from Allied air raids amounted to 20% of the equipment, but production was restored through resource redistribution. And from January to May 1945 the output dropped to 100 to 150 units due to the Red Army's advance and shortages of materials, resulting in a total production of 2,827 vehicles. According to clarified data, the Bundesarchiv lists 2,584 produced at BMM and 243 at Skoda, exceeding the production of the Tiger at 1,350 units and the Panther at about 6,000. Orders were originally for 1,000 units, then increased to 4,000, but fulfilled by 70%, with the cost of one vehicle being about 50,000 Reichsmarks, which was 20% cheaper than the Stu G3. Combat use began in the summer of 1944 on the Eastern Front during Operation Bag Ration, where the Red Army destroyed Army Group Center. And in one of the first battles, a HETZER company of the 731st Anti-Tank Battalion in an ambush near Minsk destroyed 14 Soviet tanks without losses, using the classic concealment tactic, allowing the enemy to come within 500 to 800 m. The vehicles were distributed among infantry divisions to reinforce defenses, where, dug into hills or forests, they turned the advance of T-34s into a trap. And according to Wehrmacht reports, one HETZER could destroy 3 to 5 enemy tanks before being lost itself. But if flanks were outmaneuvered or aircraft bombed, the outcome was predetermined. In the west, after Normandy, HETZERs took part in the Ardennes offensive and in Operation North Wind, where their low silhouette helped in wooded terrain. And the tactical nuances lay in the strength of ambushes, where reconnaissance played a key role through infantry patrols for positioning. But the weakness was the limited gun traverse, requiring rotation of the entire hull, and vulnerable sides. And weather influenced performance so that in mud or snow the engine slipped, and logistics failed due to shortage of spare parts. The effectiveness was high in defense, but losses of up to 80% in some units, according to estimates, were explained not only by combat but also by the cramped interior, where many died from suffocation or burns, unable to evacuate in time. And in veterans' memoirs stored in the Bundesarchiv, commanders noted that in ambush the vehicle was a king, unseen and deadly, but inside it was hell with heat, noise, and blindness. And one loader recalled carrying 10-kilogram shells in a box the size of a coffin. And if a fire broke out, chances of escape were minimal. Variants reflected the desperation of the late war. And at the end of 1944 about 20 Panzer 38T vehicles were converted with flamethrowers instead of a gun for urban combat, and other chassis turned into Jagdpanzer recovery vehicles or were equipped with 15mm MG-151 anti-aircraft cannons, which underscored both the versatility of the design and the shortage of specialized equipment. Some HETZERs were operated by teenagers from the Hitlerjugend in desperate ambushes or even in fake surrenders. And a little-known fact is that during the Prague Uprising in May 1945 Czechoslovak insurgents captured several vehicles and turned them against the Germans, symbolizing the irony of occupation. And after the war Czechoslovakia continued production under the designation STI. And Switzerland purchased 158 units designated G-13, using them until the 1970s. In the historical context, the Jagdpanzer 38 HETZER became an example of how innovation under conditions of scarcity could prolong resistance, destroying thousands of enemy tanks and slowing the advance of the Allies. But the cost was high not only in resources but also in human lives, where cramped space and vulnerabilities claimed thousands of crews. And today it is a reminder of how machines and people became expendable material in total war. For further analysis, based on archival documents, it can be noted that the development was part of a broader Wehrmacht strategy to transition to defensive tactics after the defeats of 1943, when production of heavy tanks such as the Tiger and Panther could not cover losses, and light tank destroyers filled the gaps in the total output of German armored vehicles. In 1944 it reached its peak but was still insufficient against the numerical superiority of the Allies. In combat reports such as those stored in the National Archives in Washington, captured from the Germans, it is mentioned that the HETZER was often used in combination with infantry to create fortified positions, where its compactness allowed camouflage in ruins of cities or forested areas, and its effectiveness in such conditions reached a loss ratio of 1:4 in favor of the Germans in isolated skirmishes. But overall loss statistics of the Wehrmacht in 1944 to 1945 showed that such vehicles could not reverse the course of the war, only delaying the inevitable. Crews, as described in soldiers' diaries collected in the museum in Munich, complained about ventilation, where exhaust gases accumulated very quickly, causing headaches and nausea during long battles. And commanders preferred to fight with the hatch open, risking sniper fire, just to improve visibility, which through periscopes was limited to narrow sectors, making the vehicle vulnerable to flanking attacks. Technical improvements proposed in late reports, such as installing an additional ventilator or reinforcing side armor, were never implemented due to material shortages. And production stopped with the capture of the factories by the Red Army in April 1945, leaving behind the status of a legend as one of the most mass-produced vehicles of the late war.